Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where we have the discussions that inform, entertain, and empower educators to be the change. I am your host, Dr. Will, and I am here today with Dr. Latoya Dixon. How are you doing, Doc?
I'm great. How are you? Just got home from work, ready to go. Still in work mode. So I'm doing good.
Awesome. I've been home a lot longer than that, but it's great to
Lucky
have
you.
yeah, it's great to have you on the show. We will be here talking about leadership. For those who are uh, just tuning in, and hopefully those who have been watching, I like to talk about leadership, and especially in reference to the things that have been changing in education, particularly due to the disruption in technology. So it is great to have you on the show. I've been following you on Twitter and checking out your blog posts, and you get real deep in them. You get real deep.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So leadership, especially in this digital age,
Yeah.
means different things to different people. What does being a leader mean to you?
I think I have to say, not just thinking about leadership from the digital age perspective, but I think I have to say, I think sometimes folks are enamored with the idea of being a leader, but they don't always give credence to the fact that leadership is really difficult. It's really hard. It's a hard job. It's challenging. If you accept the call of being a leader, if you decide that's what you want to do, you have to sort of embrace the fact that you're going to face some challenges as a leader. That's part of being a leader, chief problem solver, chief strategizer, chief encourager. So it can be difficult. That's one thing leadership means to me, accepting the fact that I know that I'm going to run into some opposition. I'm going to run into some resistance. But as I was tweeting last week, every great innovator has been resisted. Every great innovator has been disrupted. And the greatest changes that have happened in our nation have been through disruption. I mean, if you just go back and look at history, it's been through disruption. It's been things that weren't comfortable, that people didn't necessarily like. Didn't mean that those things weren't great things or that leadership wasn't being exemplified. So I just embrace that and try to press forward. I would say also it means to me that as a leader, you have a responsibility to be a lifelong learner and to demonstrate that which you wish to see in those you serve. And so I expect a lot of myself. I mean, most of my blogging, my podcast, those are things I do on my own time. And I do those things to feed myself as a learner, not necessarily because those things are assigned to me, but those are the things I have to do to stay sharp and stay on top of my game and make sure that I have the ability and the tools in my toolbox to be able to really serve and assist others as their leader. So that I would say those two things are important. Being a lifelong learner and understanding that leadership is difficult. It's not easy.
So I'm gonna throw something out there to you because of something you said about how to get better, and you always strive to learn and try to get to the next level. The education from an outside perspective. So I was never a classroom. I never, came up through a traditional educational. I worked in. I did work, but I first started off working in what you would call, I guess, after school or
Yeah.
type youth leadership. But then I went into corporate America for a little bit. So for me, when people say excellence is a habit and how you got to put in the work, that means something to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are working with let's say for your as a leader, and you have teachers who don't want to do that, right? Let's just say, look, I've been teaching this way for 15 years. Okay, I got this thing cold. And whether it's a new curriculum or, now more than ever, we have just an influx of technology coming in, which is changing literally how teaching is happening. And I know we'll talk about that further down the line, but when you have teachers who are like, I don't want to be bothered with that, or appear to not have that same sort of zeal for wanting to take the next step. How do you, as a leader, coach them up to take on that challenge, or coach them up to get out?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think about that. I mean, I was a school administrator for several years prior to the role I'm currently in at the state level. When I don't know any teachers like that. All the teachers I work with, whatever I asked them to do, they were willing to do it. I never faced resistance. I say that facetiously. But I've had to work with some folks who are resistant to change. Yeah, most definitely. And I think there are a couple of different ways that you can approach that. And one is to figure out, where is that resistance coming from? What I've learned through my experience, that often that resistance isn't resistance for the sake of, you're asking me to do something that's new and I don't want to do it. It could be, I'm not comfortable with my skill set to do that. So I think professional development goes a long way, and that when we have a strategy we want to put in place, we have to make sure that that strategy isn't missing the structure it needs to support the execution of such. So let's say, for example, you're a principal in a school and you really want to push your teachers to look at personalized learning and to really work with their students to have some agency over their own learning, to know what they've mastered and what they haven't. It's one thing to give a directive and to say, this is great. I think I saw this at another school. I saw this at a conference. I learned about it. I think you all need to be doing it. It's another thing to put those things in place to help people actually make that happen. So that means you've put a structure in place. You're providing the right resources with the right professional development at the right time for the right people to help them make that happen. And so I think so often we ask folks to execute things and we don't use strategy and we don't give it a structure, and then we find they're resistant. And the real reason they're resistant is because the support they need to execute that isn't in place. Or, it's just takes some folks longer to come along than others. I don't know about you, but I've changed my mind about a lot of things in this lifetime of mine. So I always believe it's possible for folks to change their mind. And I think the best way you do that as a leader is by modeling what you want to see from other people. So I think it's very contrary and very conflicting when you say to a teacher, I want you to, or to your staff, I want you to really take advantage of all the digital tools available for communication, yet you have hour-long staff meetings where you basically stand at the front and disseminate information and read things that could be communicated in a different way to better use time. So I think we have to think about ourselves. And in my last blog, I wrote something about leaders have to look in the mirror, because I believe that. I believe that it's more important to look in the mirror than it is to look through the telescope. I think the best leaders I know, I love studying excellent leaders, have an acute awareness of what they don't know and what they don't do well. And they work constantly toward compensating for and building strengths in those areas that are opportunities for growth. That's what I think makes an excellent leader, somebody whose awareness isn't that they know everything, but they recognize what they don't know and they put things in place to help themselves along the way. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at resistance. Is it a matter of skill? Is it a matter of will? I ask myself those questions. Is it someone who's willing but doesn't have the skill? How can I coach them up? How can I give them the professional development, the resources, the support they need? I believe wholeheartedly in the I do, we do, you do philosophy. It's not just for children, it's for adults too. And so I think we can help folks along if we approach it by recognizing that resistance isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be a learning opportunity, and we should expect it. I mean, it's a natural part of the human condition. I always find it interesting, folks who say, oh, I love change. I'm so happy. Change makes me so happy. I think there's some of us who handle change better than others, but I think in general, humans are creatures of habit, and that we should expect when we ask folks to change for them to have some questions and perhaps some concerns. And if we enter our work with that expectation, then we can set up some structures, some strategies, and some supports for them that will help bring them along.
Okay, so you sort of touched on this, but in a blog post you wrote about how you are a student of leaders.
Yes.
You define your leadership style and what makes a leader versus someone who is an average leader.
How would I define my leadership style? That's hard for me because I hate, I'm not a big fan of talking about myself. I think the best way to know my leadership style would be to talk to those I've served. So I've been in education, I think 17 years, 18, I get mixed up. But I think if you talk to those I serve, they'll tell you lots of different things about me. But one is that I try very diligently to lead by example, to model what I expect to see in others, to do those things that I'm asking others to do. So the work ethic I demonstrate is a model for what I expect. And so I try to do that so that that's not questionable. I think I'm a collaborative leader. I love working in a group. I love pulling a team together. I love pulling those I serve and say, hey, this is what our department, our school, our grade level, our office, this is what we're tasked with. Let's get together on this, bring our best ideas to the table, and let's use our collective intellect, our collective will, our collective capacity to make this the absolute best it can be. I'm not really into solo leadership. I've served in solo leadership capacities. I mean, I was principal of an elementary school. I did not have an assistant principal. And then I got a grand opportunity to serve with my dear friend, Michael Wakesness, who was my co-principal. And I love that. He and I love working together. I love collaboration. I think it is essential to really working to improve your leadership. You learn so much from others, and we have to recognize that as leaders, we don't just bring value to the table. Sometimes other folks can add value to us. So it's a mutual exchange. You know, if you approach the work as a leader in that I add all the value, then what does that say about the other folks at the table? And I just don't believe that. I think there's something for me to learn from everyone. I think I'm a pretty conscientious leader. I do a lot of self-reflection. I am very open to owning up and being vulnerable in front of those I serve. If I make a mistake, I'm okay with saying, hey guys, I messed up. I messed up on that. I made a mistake. I think every leader needs to give and needs to get a little mercy and a little grace. And I don't mind making it known, I need your help. You know, I'm not here alone. This is us. I like to walk beside the team, not in front. And I think you walk beside when it's time to work. You walk in the back when it's time for praise, and you walk in the front when it's time for criticism. That's what I think a leader does. So that's what I try to do. And I would say that that's my style. I'm actually a pretty shy person. I know that's hard to believe, but I actually am. In real life, I love speaking. I do some speaking engagements. I blog. I do all these things. But in my regular everyday life, I'm pretty quiet.
Now, what you said was really inspiring, especially the last piece. That should be framed somewhere. That is awesome. But there are times, and it may not happen at every school, for every leader. But when you come across that person who, with all the efforts that you do, the work, you're walking behind and beside, and it's we, and they still say no, and they still won't do. How do you support their growth to propel forward, I guess, without throwing around your weight of your title?
I think it's really, really simple. That's a really simple answer. And when you talk about throwing around the weight of your title, I think the last place a great leader goes is positional power. There are some exceptions when you might have to do that, but that is the last place I think an excellent leader goes. I think in education, it's about keeping the conversation centered on children. And so when you're talking to folks about not doing something that needs to be done for the children, you make the conversation about the children. I have not experienced yet when I've asked someone, and I've posed this question to those I've served as a leader, are you giving the children the very best you have to offer them? I've never had a person look back at me that I posed that question to and say, well, actually I am. Because in most of those situations, there have been folks that have been resistant, or I've been trying to work with to get them on board to move along to do something. So I think you have to bring that conversation back to the children. This is what we're doing for children. Do we agree that in order for children to have the best experience they possibly can, and that education is essential, that this is what needs to happen? Yes, we agree. Then we need to talk about if we are doing what we can, everything we can in our power to the best of our ability at the level of quality that we would want our own child or every child in our school, our community, our state to have. This is about the children. And that just seems to make the conversation a lot less conflicting, because it's not about someone's personal resistance. It's about our children getting what they need.
Okay. So now let's, get to this question of technology. I'm really huge on it. And when I see the memes that go around that pedagogy is a driver and technology is accelerator, I just want to go vomit in a corner somewhere. It just disgusts me to see that. And I say that because I don't think you can separate the two nowadays. I think the way technology changes instruction is that there's such a part and so intertwined that when you think one without the other, to me, I think you miss the point, that you actually lose it. When you wake up in the morning and you go cut on the Keurig and then you use the microwave and all that stuff, that technology is so embedded in your life, you're not even thinking about what you're doing. And so when technology is like, it's not a part of what you're doing. I put out this thing on Twitter this morning, was that we are teaching the screenager generation. The computer is their paper and pencil.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking about a different type of student, a different type of child we're dealing with now. We're not even, so the game has even changed on that level. So I say that to say, because of all this technology and people are going one-to-one, you have BYOD, how should school leadership approach just the reality of this is changing how we teach? This is the traditional model is just done with. It should be done with anyway. But how should they lead that ship, knowing that this is going to be totally different from the landscape that everyone has personal experience with and even academic experience with?
I think, leadership in that area, like with everything else that you might do, starts with educating yourself. How do you talk to staff about how technology can change the landscape of their classroom or even their school if you're not educated enough to coach them around that? So I think you have to start by educating yourself. And I'm a firm believer, and I'm going to kind of answer this backwards. I'm going to push back a little bit on what you shared. I believe in utility. So it's about how useful can you make something. So I should say that I have a sister who's an engineer who's married to an engineer. And we talk a lot about why certain products supersede other products. And it's about utility. So how you make it useful. So when I think about technology in the classroom, like every other program, every other initiative out there, every other school reform effort, it's at the mercy of the people who are executing it. So although technology may have a lot of ability and a lot of opportunity for kids to learn and grow in different ways, if the teacher isn't able to recognize how to maximize the utility of that technology, the limits of how much it will impact student learning, which is at the end of the day, the outcome, is just limited. I mean, it's limited. There's a limit to how much it'll impact student learning. So I think you start as a leader, not just preaching about how the world has changed and how students are different. That's certainly true. I believe it. I'm a techie. I love technology, if you can't tell. I mean, I have everything Apple. I could be their spokesperson. I have an Apple Watch, an iPhone, iPad, MacBook, you name it, I have it. And I actually, with my colleague Michael Wakesness, we were the first co-founders of EdCamp SE. We think technology is the greatest thing. But we do also believe wholeheartedly, and I do, subscribe to the thought that it's at the mercy of the people executing it. You've got to give people the strategy and structure to make that as effective, to maximize the effectiveness of that technology. Otherwise, you have people who are being compliant because students are different, but they can't really speak to how using a particular piece of technology or using a particular app or redesigning and restructuring what learning looks like in their classroom is going to impact learning outcomes. That's the key. If you're choosing to use that, if that's what you're doing, it shouldn't just be for the sake of the world has changed, because otherwise it's just a substitution. I'm sure you're familiar with the SAMR model, but you want to get people to the place where they're really thinking about utility. How do I make myself more effective? How do I improve learning outcomes? And is that something I can do with technology, rather than what technology can I use to teach this? The first thought would be, what's the best way for me to positively impact learning outcomes? And then based on that, does that mean integrating technology? Not, I need to integrate technology. Now, how do I teach this? So I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does.
if you reverse that thought, I think you get better utility out of folks, and they can better see the value of using it.
Oh yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I have never, with the teachers I work with, I've never walked into a room and said, "Hey, you have to
Right.
technology for everything." You know, my thing is, if let's say we're looking at NWA data, for example, data, and you got your standard deviations is 17 plus. From that you don't need to sit up there and lecture for 50 minutes. That's just a failed strategy, because your students your levels are so, in terms of their ability, is from here to here, that it's not going to be effective anyway. So that's when I go, okay, now let's bring out this technology to where we can now individualize instruction for students, look at personalized learning, but then and within a way to which you can reach kids where they are, to move them forward and provide opportunities for students to also demonstrate their learning in a different way. So instead of having your kids write that essay, which they should, because that is a excellent skill they need to have, but that kid could also, instead of writing that essay in a standard essay, they can do a blog post.
Yeah.
Or that kid could build a website, or that student could do a podcast. So that's sort of my viewpoint in terms of, okay, when I say, technology is changing everything, and that's how we do this. Because I don't want kids just, oh, I'm on here clicking, click, 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 But I want it to be such a part of what goes on in the classroom. But I want it to be effective instruction, but I want it to be effortless. You know what I'm saying? Because of what they're doing is just really, you're really reaching the kids, you're really going after it. So definitely, I like what you said. That was real nice. I may have to show what you said to some of the teachers in the classroom, because we do have those teachers, as always, those who are your stars.
Yes.
Okay, they're going to take off.
Yeah.
You got that little middle ground. Every now and then they'll dazzle you, but they kind of just keep it. And then you have those who they'll tell you, I'm not using this until an administrator says something, and then they may do a little something, but it's never maximizing what they can do. And paper is so limited. So that's what gets me sometimes. It's like, it's just so limited, because where's your feedback? If you have your kids do a worksheet, or you have them write something on paper, where's the dynamicism in that? Where is the engagement?
Yeah, and I don't think feedback. I think feedback is the key. It's so key in so many things, but I don't think that has to be in the form of technology. I think that's about not having an appropriate structure to help children execute the things you want them to execute. I'm going to go back to structure and strategy. So how do you set up a structure in your classroom for you to be able to give children feedback? What does that look like? Now, when I started teaching, I had a chalkboard and an overhead projector. And I love my chalkboard. I was actually talking about it yesterday. I love my chalkboard. I heard one of those things that you put 5 lines on the board and they're like perfectly straight. Yes. And I had a package of overhead projector pens, like every color. And I just would use different colors, and then I would photocopy on transparencies. It was a great thing. But I think it's really about talking to teachers about how to become more effective, and can this tool help you do that? You know, what's the strategy, what's the structure? If we know that giving students feedback, like we know when we observe teachers and we want to improve their practice, that giving them quality, robust, specific feedback is essential to improving their practice. That's the same for students. If we know that, what structure do you have embedded in your classroom to allow you to give kids feedback? Now, for most people, or maybe not most, but for some, they're going to go right to technology. They're going to say technology makes that easy. You know, if I use Edmodo, we use Schoology in my last district, I'm able to give students feedback quickly. I'm able to see multiple students at a time. You know, so it's about getting them to think about how that technology can help them get to the end goal, and what's the best way for that. You know, feedback's the critical piece. How do you set up structure? How do you structure your classroom in a way for you to be able to do that, execute that critical piece consistently for all of your students? Doing that via technology, giving feedback, for me would be much easier than what I did when I was a teacher, writing on papers and giving feedback on essays. I was an English teacher on essays. It'd be much easier if I could do that electronically. I'm faster and it's more convenient. So I think you have to get them to think about what's the outcome. Start with the end in mind. What's the outcome you're wanting for? Now, what do you think is the best structure and strategy you can use to get kids there? And I think teachers, educators will naturally work their way to where you want them to go. And when they find the benefit in that, not just for themselves, hey, this is making my life a little easier, but I'm seeing improved outcomes for my students, they'll go, you know what? I've seen this in a school. I've seen a teacher who just, like you said, the high flyers just takes off, a teacher who just takes off with it. And then somebody said, what's she doing over there? I want to know what she's doing. And then they try it. And it's all about opportunity cost. You know, you want to see what are the benefits of what I'm doing. And once folks see the benefit, people are usually sold, because I believe success is an addiction. So people who are successful want it all the time.
Awesome. So before we go, what is your call to action for administrators who want to lead as though this is in the 90s? And I know, you on more than once you've talked about, how there is a sort of, I don't want to say a canon way of leading, but leadership is, I guess, good leadership is good leadership. However, what I have noticed, or even in my own, studies, as you have studied, leadership does change over time, and leadership is also situational. And when you have those who believe in leading a certain way and refuse to sort of look at, oh, times are changing, students have changed, even teachers, have changed, and parents, the community has changed. But I'm going to keep on doing this thing like I've been doing. Again, what's your call to action for them to sort of break out and themselves sort of transform?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. I hate to repeat myself, but I think my call to action is to educate yourself. As a leader, you have a responsibility to be the chief learner in your building, in your role, in your whatever your occupation, and in whatever capacity you're serving. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to make sure that your knowledge and your skill set is not just up to par, but is as sharp as it can be, so that you can work folks through situations like that. And I want to be on the cutting edge of leadership. I'm constantly studying excellent leaders, and I'm thinking about what made them excellent. And as I study those body of leaders, I recognize that there are a few things that they have in common. And one is that they're visionary. They have a vision. They're often more certain of that vision than anybody else. When everybody else is not sure, they're sure. They know what they know, what they know. Two is that they're learners. They are well-read. They are knowledgeable. They have so many tools in their toolbox. And I don't just mean tools of getting folks to come along with you, of just, charisma. I mean knowledge, skills, and will. I think that leadership, a large part of leadership is influence, and large part of influence is modeling what you demonstrate. You lead with your work and what your actions. I think they deliver results. I think so. If you as a leader take a look in the mirror and you're not delivering the results that you've been tasked with delivering, you have to do some self-reflection about what is it that I can do to better improve these results as the leader. And we have to accept responsibility for that as leaders. So those are some of the things I would say, making sure that you've educated yourself on those things you want to lead, making sure you are in tune with the results you need to be delivering, and making sure that you're doing self-reflection on a regular basis to make sure that you have your leadership exactly in a way you want it to be, and recognizing where you have gaps in your leadership or gaps in your knowledge or gaps in your thoughts, and working to fill those gaps on your own. I mean, you got to be self-driven, a perpetual learner. I believe that. If you want to be a leader and you're waiting for someone to direct you on how to do it, it's going to be a long road. Leaders have to be leaders. I think the best leaders live with on your mark, get set, go in their head. I do. I'm not saying I'm terrific, but I think the best leaders do that. They're always thinking. They're always thinking. They're always strategizing. So I think that's important.
Awesome. No, I thank you. And part of, and I love your answers, and you keep bringing them. This is awesome. I can't wait to share this out because I love that sense you have of learning growing as a habit. I was talking to my wife earlier about this. One of the reasons that makes me that I'm a Steelers fan is because they expect, if they don't win the Super Bowl, they had a failed season, because for them.
I was going to end this conversation. Carolina Panthers all day. Panthers all day. But that's okay. I'm going to be professional, and I'm going to let you talk about the Steelers. But Carolina Panthers all day. All day. Carolina.
You went there. Yeah, I'm serious. I cannot believe you there. But, the Steelers don't celebrate because they won a game.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, we won a game, so what?
Yeah.
Because for them, we have one goal, one mission, excellence. If we don't make it, we didn't have a successful season. And that's how I sort of try to live my life. And I'm still a work in progress. So I'm not going to sit up here and go every day I'm 1,000% excellent. So I'm still working every day.
I am too. Yeah.
To get better. But it was really awesome to receive that energy from you to talk about, getting educated, working hard, filling in those gaps, doing those things, because it's very important. And what I have noticed, and I don't know if you have, but, sometimes we all drink the Kool-Aid, because on Twitter, it seems like everybody has a certain mindset of, okay, we're going to push. But then when you leave Twitter and you go out to the schools or whatever, and people are kind of like, and you're like, you don't think that way? Like, you're not focused like that. So this is awesome. And like I said, I just cannot wait to put this up. So before I even put the blog post together, I'm going to just tweet this out from YouTube and share it out, because I think, what you said this evening is definitely worth listening to.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And people, this is going up on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm putting this on LinkedIn, Facebook. It's going out on the audio version will be going on SoundCloud, and it'll be going on my blog as well. As always, invest in you, edu. Peace.